In order to have something look real when we're rendering it in 3D, it's important to understand that real things are rarely perfect. So, what I'm going to show you today is how to make some roughness maps, some imperfection maps, in order to really spice up your renders and make them look photoreal. Okay, so for this project you will need some chalk and some craft paper, some black craft paper. Okay, so you can't see exactly what I'm doing in this shot because my setup's pretty janky, but what you want to do is you want to crush up the chalk into as fine a powder as you can so that you can spread it out on the black craft paper. So for this particular imperfection map, I wanted a sort of scratched look. So I got this steel wire brush and I just went over the chalk with it and just gave it a scratched random look as best I could. Some more of those maps.
Off your computer.
Yeah. I also wanted to try out making like some shoe print maps, so I did a bit of that as well. Just remember when you're making things like this that you have full creative liberty to do like whatever you want. Anything can be an imperfection map, pretty much. Okay, so next is the part where we actually create the imperfection maps. So these are a couple of that I've made from the images that I got while I was in the shed using the chalk and the craft paper to get my scratches and my shoe prints. And I'll show you how I got these results right now. So what you want to do first is find an ideal image out of the ones you've taken, right? So I took a couple of images of each. You can take however many you like. What you really want to do is get a balance between the amount of detail you get in the image, right? So how close you are and how many pixels you've got to work with. It's going to be different for everyone. Ideally, you're going to have a high resolution camera to take these images with, but I only had my phone, which does take images in 4K, but you know, when you're taking a little segment out of the image like that, it's bound to come down to something smaller like 1K. So I found that this image was my favorite for the scratch map. This image was my favorite for the shoe prints because they just had the most detail and the least sort of motion blur or highlights going on. You want to avoid things like highlights and shadows when you're taking images like these because they will stuff around and make, you know, they'll show up in your maps and it'll be like, you know, you'll have a map like what I've made here, but you have like this big white spot somewhere and it'll be like, well, that doesn't fit in, and it'll just stand out, especially if you're tiling the textures. It'll look really weird. So what I'll do is I'll just take this image into Photoshop, create a layer from background. I always do that, it's just habit. So you want to find an area that you like the most and you want to sort of crop in on it, right? One that doesn't have too much motion blur going on is ideal. So something like that will do. Avoid motion blur, right? Try to hold the camera as stable as you can. Obviously, you know, you're human, you're going to shake a little bit. But do whatever you can to avoid those little, you know, artifacts and things. So I've just got this region here. I like that. So, go into the image section here, go down to mode, set it to grayscale. Roughness maps are grayscale, they don't have any color information, it's black and white, okay? What I want to do next is I'll duplicate this layer and we'll just have it sitting there because we're going to use that in a minute. First thing you want to do after that is go to Filter, Other, Offset. So we've run into a problem here, right? When I went to Offset, the seams don't come together at the center of the image. That's because we want to offset the image by half the resolution of the image, right? So here I've basically got 1500 by 1500, but I'm going to reduce that down to 1K because it's a size that's more commonly used for images like these. So now I can go to Filter, Other, Offset, and I've offset it by half the image resolution. Click OK. And what we want to do here is we'll grab our healing brush tool and set it to a hardness of around 30%, whatever size you need. But basically, we just want to go over these seams like this. Sort of patch them out. Use whatever areas from the image you want. Ideally, they'll be of a similar sort of level of tone as where you're patching. So the next thing we're going to do is we save this for a particular reason, right? This is our unedited, unmoved image. We're going to apply a mask to it. We're going to click on the mask, hit Control I to invert the mask, and now you're seeing the image that's underneath this layer, right? We want to edit the layer mask, grab a white brush with a relatively low hardness setting, and we want to just sort of cover up little spots where it's become too uniform, or where it's like, you know, you can tell that it's just an image that's been slapped together and sort of someone's gone over the seams, right? Try not to go over the edge, because that'll make a seam appear when you offset it again, right? You just want to do that sort of thing. I kind of like that detail down there. Okay, so that's pretty good. That's our scratch mask. We can bring these together with Control E, and what we'll do now is we'll offset it again just to make sure we don't have any seams. All good. We don't need to apply that offset, we're just checking. Okay, so it's a relatively uniform image, and what we're going to do again is duplicate this layer with Control J. We will edit this layer that we've just copied. We'll go Filter, Other, High Pass, and that just gives us a bit more control over like the sort of detail that's showing up in the image. The black splotchy, you can sort of see black shadowy areas coming through. So we can ramp this up to sort of control that, you know, what's going on. I'm going to do 8 pixels for this. I think that's pretty good. So what we can do is we can grab this and we just blend it in by turning down the opacity until we like the look of our result. Now I kind of look at it and I like it at 50%. So that's pretty good. And we can also fiddle around with the levels if you wish, in order to really get, you know, some control over what's going on with the grays and stuff. Bring it all in, make it... But mostly I like to do that when I take my image back into whatever program I'm using, like Blender or Cinema 4D. So I'm going to go up here, File, Save As. I save mine as a JPEG. So I've already done this once before. I'm going to save this again as Scratch 2_R, but you can save it as whatever you want, right? You can save it you know, as a PNG, you can save it as a TIFF, you can save it as a TGA, whatever you need, whatever format you need, right? This is just an example. Okay, so I've set up a little scene in Blender here just to show you what you can do with an imperfection map when trying to make a little photorealistic scene. Basically, got myself a little scotch glass here, and I've got some scotch in it, and I've got my little ice cubes. I'll just show you how to really get your roughness material to work. You don't have to copy my specific settings. It's just to give you a basic idea of how it can be used, really. We want to turn it into a transmission, right, shader, and we want to turn the roughness right down for now, just so we can get a basic idea, right? So I always do that when I'm making something glass, just to make sure that the geometry all looks right, and it looks pretty good to me, I think. What I'll do is I'll click on this, and I'll go, you can Shift A, S, image texture if you want, and then you can browse for it that way. Or you can just go to wherever you're keeping your materials and you can drop it in. So this is the scratch material. I don't think that'd work great on a glass, so I'm going to use a fingerprint material that I made already the other day. It uses the same process as I've just shown you. It's just a different material. Plug the color into the roughness section. We want it to be non-color, just to make sure. And then we can go color ramp, bring that in. And this is how you control where the little specks and spots and stuff will show up on your glass, right? We got little specks showing up and stuff. And we can also fiddle with the tiling if we want. We can make it, you know, make it so that it's not so obvious and large. And I think that would be ideal here because we don't want, you know, little smears all over the place. Oops, I've lost my thing. We don't want little smears all over the place. We just want to kind of see it on the glass, kind of sitting there, right? And that, we can also make that a little bit more believable by bringing in the tones like this, okay? That's what I meant when I said that you could just bring it into whatever program you're using and fiddle around with a color ramp to decide how much of certain values show up, and you can also change those values to whatever you like. And so here's the final render with the imperfection maps on it. I think it looks pretty good. I did some compositing in Photoshop afterwards, but I'll show you the basic unedited render as well. I'll also make sure to leave the settings I used when I was rendering in the description, the sample rate, and the resolution. Yeah, so thanks for watching. This was my first tutorial of this kind, and I'm interested in making more if this gets a pretty good response. I'll get back to you on that. Thanks very much.